In 2021, Real Madrid played 0 Champions League finals. They did not win La Liga. They finished second in their domestic league, lost to Chelsea in the semi-final of Europe's biggest club competition, and by any football measure, they had a forgettable season. Their revenue that year? 641 million euros. That is not a typo. A club that did not win anything meaningful still generated more money than the GDP of some small nations, and they were not even close to their peak. So either something is very broken about how we think sports work, or Real Madrid figured out something that most businesses, in any industry, never do. This is not a story about trophies. This is a story about architecture.
Most people think football clubs make money the way most sports franchises do. You win, you sell tickets, you collect prize money, you sell merchandise to happy fans. Simple. And for 99% of clubs, that is basically true. Winning matters, losing hurts. Revenue follows performance. Real Madrid is not most clubs. Over the past 20 years, they have quietly built a financial machine that operates almost independently of whether they win or lose on a given Saturday. It generates cash in good seasons and bad seasons. It survives managerial chaos, aging rosters, and global pandemics. Understanding how it works is not just interesting if you follow football, it is interesting if you follow money. Because what Real Madrid built is not a football club that happens to be a business, it is a global media and entertainment brand that happens to own a football club. That distinction matters more than anything else in this story. Let us break down where the money actually comes from. Real Madrid's revenue sits in 3 buckets: broadcasting, commercial, and match day. Most clubs lean heavily on the first 2 and hope match day handles itself. Real Madrid treats all 3 as engineered systems. Start with broadcasting. This is where European football has become genuinely absurd. La Liga, the Spanish top flight, holds a collective television deal worth billions distributed across its clubs. Real Madrid, as one of the 2 gravitational centers of that league, pulls in one of the largest shares. Then at the UEFA Champions League. Even a club that exits in the round of 16 can collect 50 to 80 million euros just for showing up and playing group stage games. Real Madrid almost never exits in the round of 16. But here's the part that most people miss. Real Madrid negotiated something that most European clubs never had. For decades, before La Liga centralized TV rights, Real Madrid and Barcelona sold their own television rights individually, separately, directly. This gave them a head start in global broadcast exposure that compounded over time. By the time collective selling became mandatory, Real Madrid was already beamed into living rooms across Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the United States in a way no other Spanish club could replicate.
That exposure did not just bring viewers. It built something harder to price: familiarity. Which leads to the second bucket: commercial revenue. This is where Real Madrid's machine becomes genuinely impressive. Their commercial income, sponsorships, partnerships, licensing, merchandise, runs to several hundred million euros per year. Their shirt sponsor deals, stadium naming conversations, global partner agreements with companies like Adidas, Emirates, and a rotating roster of brands trying to access Real Madrid's audience. This income arrives regardless of results. Think about that for a moment. Adidas does not pay Real Madrid based on where they finish in the table. Emirates does not renegotiate their deal because Madrid lost a derby. These contracts are signed for years. The cash flows whether Madrid wins or whether they get knocked out in October. And the reason those brands pay is not trophies, it is reach. Real Madrid claims, and the data broadly supports, that they have somewhere between 500 million and 1 billion followers and fans globally. Even if you cut that number in half, it is still a number that makes Fortune 500 brand managers wake up at night thinking about how to access it. Winning trophies helps build that audience over decades. But once the audience exists, it becomes somewhat self-sustaining. The brand attracts viewers because it is Real Madrid, and being Real Madrid attracts more brand value. Then, match day. The Bernabéu Stadium, now in a state of spectacular renovation, is being rebuilt not as a football stadium, but as what club executives describe as a 365-day entertainment venue. Retractable roof, modular pitch, capacity for concerts, boxing matches, NFL games, esports events. The stadium is no longer designed around 23 home league games a year. It is designed to generate revenue on every day of the calendar. The renovated Bernabéu, by conservative estimates, is expected to add 150 million euros per year in non-match day revenue. That is money that has nothing to do with football results whatsoever.
Now here is where it gets interesting and a little uncomfortable. Real Madrid's wage bill in recent years has been among the highest in world football. In some seasons, wages consumed more than 70% of revenue. The players who carry the brand, the Ronaldos, the Benzemas, the Bellinghams, do not come cheap, and their transfer fees can be astronomical. So, the club spends enormous sums to attract players. Why? Not primarily because those players win games. They often do, but that is almost secondary. The real function of a Galactico, the term Real Madrid coined for their superstar recruitment strategy, is marketing. When Real Madrid signs a global superstar, they are not just buying a footballer, they're buying his audience, his social media following, his cultural presence in markets Madrid cares about. When they signed Cristiano Ronaldo in 2009 for what was then a world record fee, they did not just get a striker, they got 50 million new followers in Asia, a merchandise operation that exploded overnight, and a content machine that ran for 9 years. The shirt sales in that first year reportedly recouped a significant portion of the transfer fee alone. This is the uncomfortable math. The players are the product, but they are also the marketing department. And this is where the model has a hidden tension, because players age, their audiences migrate, and the transfer fees required to attract the next generation of global superstars have become so large that even Real Madrid can feel the strain. In 2023, they signed Jude Bellingham from Borussia Dortmund for over 100 million euros. His performances were spectacular, but watch what happened in the commercial announcements that followed. Madrid's engagement in the UK market jumped. Their merchandise sales in England spiked. The investment was not just footballing, it was geographic. The club thinks in markets, not in midfielders.
There is a version of this story that sounds like pure genius. A club so brilliantly run that it prints money regardless of results. An institution so powerful that global brands queue up to attach themselves to its crest. And that version is partially true. But the reality has cracks. Real Madrid carries significant debt. The Bernabéu renovation, estimated at over 1.5 billion euros, has been financed heavily through credit. The club's debt levels in recent years have drawn scrutiny from analysts who note that the revenue model depends on a set of assumptions that could break in uncomfortable ways. What if the Champions League restructures revenue distribution? It already has, multiple times. What if broadcast deals plateau, as some analysts now argue is beginning to happen in European football broadly? What if a superstar signing does not deliver the expected commercial returns because the audiences have fragmented across too many platforms for any single club to dominate? And then there is the political economy of modern football. The failed European Super League, which the Real Madrid's president Florentino Perez championed aggressively, was in many ways an attempt to firewall the club's revenue from the uncertainty of merit-based competition. The idea was simple. If the biggest clubs always play each other, the revenue becomes predictable. You never miss out on a Champions League season because you finished sixth. It failed, publicly, humiliatingly. But the fact that Perez pursued it reveals something important. Even the people running this machine understand that it is more fragile than it looks.
Zoom out far enough, and what you are looking at is something that goes well beyond football. Real Madrid is a test case for what happens when a sports club stops thinking of itself as a sports club, when it starts thinking of itself as a media company, a content platform, a global entertainment property that uses athletic competition as its primary programming. Other clubs have noticed. Manchester City's owners have built a network of clubs across multiple continents to maximize commercial territory. PSG has been engineered from the ground up as a vehicle for Qatari soft power and brand projection. The logic is spreading. The question worth sitting with is whether this model serves football
or slowly hollows it out. Because if the sport becomes primarily a content engine for commercial revenue, the results start to matter less. And if the results matter less, the competitive tension that made football compelling enough to build billion-dollar brands in the first place begins to erode. It is a slow contradiction, almost elegant in its irony. The thing that made Real Madrid worth billions was the genuine drama of football, the unpredictability, the stakes, the moments of improbable triumph. And the logical endpoint of monetizing that brand perfectly is to try to engineer out the unpredictability. Real Madrid will almost certainly end this decade as the highest valued football club on earth. Their revenue will grow, the Bernabéu will become a money machine unlike anything football has seen. The brand will continue to expand. And none of that will tell you anything meaningful about whether they are the best football team in the world in any given year. That is not a criticism, it is just a description of what they have become. A business so large and so well constructed that winning is almost optional. Which raises one question worth carrying with you. If football success is no longer the primary driver of football revenue, what is football actually for? The clubs are not sure they want to answer that.
Real Madrid doesn't need to win every game to make billions. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the channel grow and brings you more stories behind the world's biggest businesses.